Welcome to Audiobook Connection, the weekly podcast that pulls back the curtain on the audiobook world. I'm your host, Becky Parker-Geist, and we're here to help authors, narrators, and listeners connect more deeply with the stories they love. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Becky Parker-Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm also a co-host of the podcast Indie Authors Tell All. I'm CEO and founder of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks, where we help authors with audiobook production, distribution, and marketing. And I am also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association. I'm excited today to be with Skylar Lyralen Kaye. Skylar is an award-winning writer, filmmaker, and solo performer, and narrator of the recently released book, Bachelorx, a non-binary memoir about leaving a 35-year, nearly sexless marriage to go on the apps and date. The audiobook features 47 distinct characters, 18 of them Sky's own inner voices, 29 people they have known and loved. Sky, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And I understand that you are meeting with me today in several time zones away. You're in Portugal, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a 5-hour difference.
Yeah, that's great.
No, wait, 8 hours.
8
You're
hours,
in California.
I think. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the Oregon area. I'm just curiosity about when did you move to Portugal?
I officially moved in September of last year, but
okay.
I traveled all of 2025.
Wow.
So I left the United States in January, and I was in different parts of Europe all year.
Right. So then you found Portugal and decided to stay?
I was always applying for what's called a D7 visa, like a green card, and you're not allowed to be in the Schengen area of Europe for more than 90 days. So I investigated Portugal, but then I had to go be in the UK or Ireland or Scotland, which I did. So.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So I'm really excited to talk with you about your audiobook and the recording of it. We had, for our guest, we had a brief conversation previous to this call about the acting and the accents and the challenges. So we're really going to dive right into that. And let me just start off with, you have many different accents, is my understanding, in your characters have many different accents. Could you tell our listeners some of the accents that you were facing and had to deal with?
So I had to do... It was mostly people I dated, a little bit of people from my childhood, because I lived in 2 different places then. So, but almost immediately I had to do a Puerto Rican accent. And then I did a British accent, but it had to have Russian undertones. That was really interesting. And then I did Boston, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So those were the 5 that really dominated the audio recording.
Yeah, wow. So as you approached the project, tell us a little bit about, as you were thinking about the technically how you were going to approach the recording, where you were going to do that, how you were going to do that. Tell us a little bit about your process and your thinking and the decisions that you made in getting yourself set up before we dive into the acting part.
So I tried DIY, kind of building a studio in my apartment, which is completely wrong for audio. It's all stone walls and the sound just bounces everywhere. And I was working with an editor, so I would record and then we would talk about it. And I was very committed to clear sound, not only for ACX standards, but my book has a lot of experimentation and outlier kind of identities. And I always feel like then you need to really show that as an artist, you know what you're doing. So James is my editor, and he said, I think you should find a studio. And so I did. And I just, the people I worked with, Tiago, who's Portuguese, he was the one who owns the studio. And he set me up, and the sound was unbelievable. Like the microphone, the quality, everything was great. And that one, and it's 15 minutes from my house. So I would vocally warm up while I was walking up the Portuguese streets to get to the studio. It's like everybody's on their way to work. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. But that was the technical setup. And then I would give James the files, and sometimes he was like okay about the sound, but I wasn't okay about the performance. I would listen to it and say, yeah, I got to do that again, you know?
Yeah. What were the length of your sessions that you did?
I did a lot of 2-hour sessions because that was the time that Tiago had.
Okay.
I think the longest I did was 5 or 6 hours. And I was tired after that.
Yeah.
and I could tell that vocally I would be starting to fade at the, the final hour. So it was good to do it in short bursts. And that also meant I rehearsed at least the night before. I would rehearse and practice everything. So it's easier to do that if you don't have as much to accomplish in the studio.
Right.
Yes. You're not rehearsing quite as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So diving into a little bit more of the actual recording process. And I'm asking you these questions largely because there are authors in our audience who are thinking about recording their own and are not necessarily coming in with your level of experience in terms of production. And so hearing what somebody who is experienced in production, like that you're not trying to do 6-hour sessions 5 days in a row, and that you are rehearsing. If you could tell us a little bit more about the preparation that you were doing. You were talking about the rehearsing, and tell us a little bit more even about what that was like, what your rehearsals were like.
So there were 2 parts to the rehearsal. One was just hearing myself. I mean, I had read the book out loud to my writers group, but to hear myself read it and to think about, where are there arcs? Where does there need to be emphasis? Where is there contrast between the different modes of discourse in my book? Because my book has scenes, it also has interior dialogue, and it has the mythopoetic. And I think, though, that the focus was the accents, because for me as an actor, I can't learn 5 accents in the time that I had. I can't do it. It takes me 3 weeks to learn one.
Yeah.
So I had to find another way to create those voices. And so, we have so much available to us now.
Right.
And there are platforms, and I went on them, and I would digitally play with the sound of the voice, right? So I need this, Russian British accent. Yeah. And I would ask for that, and then I would give the software cues, and then I would memorize the lines I had to say in that accent. So what I was doing was mimicry, right? I wasn't learning the accent, but I was using the skills of mimicry, and I would like listen, practice, record it, listen to what I had recorded, and then I just kept doing it until I was satisfied.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a kind of theater approach, right? To rehearse a lot until you get it right. In film, you don't do that. Yeah. But the film part of my background was I knew that I could do takes. Right. So once I got to the studio, I started using, kind of as a director, producer, I would do takes for the parts of the book that were hardest to achieve as an actor.
Yeah. In the studio where you were recording, were you asking them for the raw file without, with all of the takes, any stumbles, whatever, and not doing a punch and roll in there? So
Yeah.
you'd then
Yeah.
have all of that material to choose from when you went to the post-production side.
Right. And
Yeah.
I had an editor who he could insert single lines.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So if
Yeah.
he was so good at cutting,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very helpful.
Yeah. 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 That's cool. In scenes like with your first fight with Eurydice, so you navigate Yuri's Boston accent, your own external responses to her, and the voices and commentary in your mind during that fight. So,
Right.
right, it's a painful break between the lovers, between they're deeply disagreeing about personal boundaries. So, how in that situation, how did you and your editor work to create scenes that contain these layers of internal and external experience and emotion that happening simultaneously? I mean, it's a lot. It's one thing, as you described, to learn that how to pronounce those words, those lines in the accent, and a whole other thing to make sure that the emotion behind it is genuine. So,
Yes. So it's interesting because Eurydice, I mean, I'm using the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice in the mythopoetic parts of the book. And so Eurydice is a huge character. And in scenes like that, I I had to be able to do the whole scene with her accent. Like there are scenes with other characters that are minor. If I'm struggling with the accent, I just recorded the lines by themselves and had James insert them.
mhm.
That would not work in a scene like this
Yeah, yeah.
because there is so much build. And I drilled her accent over and over and over again. Like that was one where I used kind of theater technique on the accent.
Mhm,
And and also I could take enough of a pause for there to be a shift in which character I was playing and which voice I was using.
mhm,
And I feel like that there's a way in which, if this were fiction, I would have had to, really have. In Meisner, you would use fantasies, and you would create a whole world, a layer of imaginary of the imaginary circumstances.
mm,
But for this, in Memoir, I lived it.
mm,
So a lot of it's stored in my body. And if I'm connected to my body and I'm allowing the memory to be real to me, it's not hard to find the emotion.
mhm.
And that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like, I still have some of those feelings. It was kind
Right.
of fun to do it.
Did you find that the switching back and forth, because when we're performing on stage, of course, we play one side of that conversation. We're one character embodying that fully. And of course, in audiobooks, we're going back and forth. We're playing all the different characters who happen to be in the scene. And did you find that a particular challenge in the switching back and forth, or was the pausing enough to allow you to shift? Tell us let's dive into the weeds of that a little bit more.
I think the important thing to recognize is you get better, right? So
Yeah.
I wasn't as good at it in the beginning as I was by the end of the book, and then I went
Mm.
back to the beginning and re-recorded because I had figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very helpful that I have a solo performer background
Mhm.
because my last solo show, I played a lot of characters, and it was a lot of single lines, and
Mhm. Mhm.
I wasn't doing the accents. It was Canadian and American. That was
Okay.
it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that the way to do it is to kind of log it almost in your body.
Mhm.
There's a way in which, there was one accent where I just held my face in a certain way.
Yeah.
To the voice.
Yes.
And
yeah.
that was the cue to the voice.
Right.
And what I learned is if I don't rush, if I take enough time to alter my physicality, the vocal things will happen very naturally and there will be a flow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but let's just take a short pause. We're going to come right back. Okay, let's get real. Sadly, most authors struggle to reach their full audience and find it almost impossible to earn back their investment in audiobooks. Why? Because standard retailers pay such low royalties and give authors no control or marketing tools. But Amplify Audiobooks is changing the equation. You earn about triple the royalties compared to standard retailers, and that adds up fast. You have complete control over pricing, access to who your customers are so you can connect with them, mapped out and gamified marketing quests so you always know what's next on your marketing journey. And it's fun. A host of built-in marketing tools to help you reach more people, and a community that's excited to discover and support new voices. All so you can become the successful author you've always dreamed of. So stop whispering into the void and start building real momentum. Amplify Audiobooks, because books should bring us together in ways that help us all thrive. AmplifyAudiobooks.com. Okay, I want you to tell us a little bit more. You mentioned Meisner and the Meisner technique and your work in that. So would you tell us a little bit more about, um, in brief, about the Meisner technique, because many of our listeners won't be familiar with it, but then also how you have, sort of the relationship, I guess, or how you've utilized that or not in your work here with Bachelorx.
So, I mean, I taught this. So,
Yeah.
the great acting teacher was Konstantin Stanislavski. And then there are 3 American teachers who kind of bridged off from him. And Sanford Meisner was one of them. His technique is the most relational. So you are relying on creating a relationship with another actor, responding to every cue, leaving that, there's a thing, leave yourself alone, react authentically within the character that you're living. So I think that the thing I would say about Meisner is the emphasis is on authenticity, right? Meisner is the technique for a performance that feels very spontaneous and very real.
Right.
So in doing an audiobook, I like, who am I going to Meisner, right? Am I going to Meisner myself? Because even in solo performance, you can Meisner the audience. So I can Meisner myself, especially with my inner voices. But I think the big thing is locating the physical reality of your body to create authenticity, right? If I am experiencing tension in my body and I allow that to become part of the character and the performance, it's going to feel real. It's going to sound real.
Right.
And in this case, you can also Meisner an imaginary scene partner. And with Memoir, that's quite easy. I know these people. So,
Yeah. And talk to us a little bit about the characters in your head, your inner voices, and the relationship that you developed between your own, like, personhood and these inner voices. Tell us a little bit more about that.
so there's a very popular and I think profound therapeutic technique called internal family systems.
Yes.
And internal family systems basically states we all have many parts of ourselves,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So we all have, protector parts. We have exiles, which are parts that carry pain and trauma. We have managers who are proactive. And for me, my parts are more separated than most people. So I can hear them with a lot of clarity and have been able to do that most of my life.
Mm.
So there's, we always talk about when we're like relating to somebody in the committee in my head, right? People will say
Yes.
that. But for me, I like my committee's very loud and I know them very well.
Mm.
So I wanted to, in writing this book, and then narrating it, I wanted to bring those parts of me to life for for a listener, for a reader.
Yeah.
And in part because I really love them.
Yeah.
And I get to hear all of my opinions at every age I've been. And, the featured part of me in this book is a 16-year-old horny teenager
Mhm.
who's getting to date for the first time after 30 years and have
Yeah.
sex for the first time after 30 years. And is also, thankfully, very, very funny, swears constantly, and states the obvious when no one wants the obvious to be stated.
Yeah. Wow. That's
And so
so
you
cool.
can imagine, like, I'm dating somebody, and that teenager is like, oh, this one's batshit crazy, you know? And I'm hearing this while I'm trying to be on a date,
Right. Yeah, yeah. It reminds me, I have done some parts work through transformational NLP, and you bringing that up reminds me, of some of those experiences that because I don't hear them quite as boldly, and I think there's something I'm working on right now, and I think, I need to go do some of that. I need to ask them to speak more clearly to me because I'm trying to figure something out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such interesting and I think really cool way that we can both understand ourselves and even communicate with ourselves. And I love that you've been able to hear your inner parts so clearly. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel lucky about that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard won. The reason I can hear them clearly is because I had a really rough time growing up, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
So I separated to survive.
Mm.
But then it's a playground, you know?
Right. Going into the humor piece a little bit more, having that as a part of the story that you're telling and as well as those, humorous voices, how would you say that impacted your experience even of just performing the book?
Well, in theater, we say comedy and tragedy are about the same material. And tragedy is about the pathos, it's about the emotion, it's about the catharsis. And comedy is about the absurdity of the behavior. And comedy is the survival muscle. So to have comedy, I mean, I write and do serio comedy. I do comedy about very serious subjects. Everything is a little absurd to me personally. And it's such a relief
Yeah.
to go deep into something hard and then laugh at it.
Yeah.
As a performer, it's like being able to take a breath.
Mhm.
Like, oh, great. Now, I did this, I embodied this, it's wrenching. And now I get to do this ridiculous commentary. And, there's a lot in dating that's ridiculous. It lends itself to comedy very, very well.
Yeah. So true, so true. I also can't help but think about, like, late night comedy shows that help us cope with, very challenging, situations, um,
Political realities,
political
yes.
realities. We won't go down that road right now, but certainly humor is such a powerful tool, really, I think. Um, and then with just sort of coming back to your characters, and I asked about your inner voices and then the other uh, characters that you've known and loved who are portrayed in your memoir. Anything that you would like to share about either the performance of them and well, let me frame it in this way. My own life in working through the personal tragedy of losing my sister when she was 25, w- part of it tore our family apart because of the choices that were made and around religion and the on the year anniversary of her passing. I was in grad school in my acting program. There was a director who was also turned out to be a psychiatrist, I think, and or a therapist. In any case, he had offered his assistance, and when I told him I was really having a hard time on this 1 year anniversary, he said, "Write a play, use your art." And what I found was that putting myself into the shoes of each of the characters, including the members of my family that I had become upset with because I felt like they weren't doing the right thing in my mind, was very healing, incredibly
Mhm.
healing. So, uh, in that kind of context, I'm curious about the people, the other characters in your story as you have stepped into their shoes at points of conflict. How that may have either changed your feeling about the relationship or them or, yourself in those experiences. Dive into that.
So there were a couple different kinds of characters and levels of knowing. So one of the things about dating, because of course I played everybody that I dated during the
Yeah,
time period of the memoir,
right.
is that you have a tendency to blame, right? There's a kind of cliche about you date somebody who tells you all their exes were crazy. Like, well, there's a common denominator in those
Hmm.
relationships. And so I did find, particularly in playing people I was dating, that after I did the scenes, I would think, I could have done better with
Mhm,
them.
mhm,
Right? It gave me compassion for them and sort of how I might have impacted them instead of thinking only of how they impacted me.
right.
And also, I did feel about being on the apps in middle age is that, you meet people who have been on and off the apps for many years. I'd been married the whole time. And there's a kind of heartbreak to their search for their person, and they're running out of time. So
Mhm,
I always had that, but it
mhm.
was very much deepened. I found that I played my ex of 35 years, and I have always, we're very amicable. So that lent itself to comedy because I didn't hate them. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Um, I did hate some of the people I dated a little bit. But I think the big challenge came for playing people who had hurt me when I was a child, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I, like you, like I know from the art, the only way is to enter into the point of view of the character that you're playing. Otherwise, it's a
yeah.
commentary. It's not bringing a person to life.
Right.
And I have to say that I had to give myself a little bit of a break.
Mm,
So I was like, okay, I can only go so far because it's really painful to actually even say these words that were said to me,
yeah,
right? That
yeah,
when someone has really treated you badly when you were vulnerable. And it did amplify my compassion, but I didn't push it as far because of what it did to my heart, right? It hurt
yeah,
too
yeah,
much, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Oh,
And I
thanks for
think
sharing that.
that's really, if you're narrating a memoir, if you're narrating a book that in some ways very close to home,
Mhm.
really making choices about how to do the best performance that also takes care of who you are as a human being.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's really good counsel, because we certainly work with many memoir authors, some of whom do want to read their own, and, it can be really painful,
Yeah.
having to press through and relive those moments, but also to relive them from both sides, especially hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. There's something that you had said about the long years of marriage and then getting onto the apps. That's so, it's also, I was married for 39 years to two different people, but then when I went on to dating apps for the first time, and that's how I found my current partner, who I'm totally in love with, and it's such a great relationship. Gave a lot of has given me a lot of perspective on what I had endured previously. So I understand that that experience of just getting on there and anything else you'd like to share about what that was like for you? Because I know what it was like for me, but after you've been married for a really long time to then step into this dating app world, which didn't even exist at the beginning of those 30 some years, right? It's just like
Right.
wasn't a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was 27 when I got involved with my ex of 35 years. And I had had a couple of relationships, but I didn't really date. So in some ways, I always say it was like I was 14 at the age
Hmm.
of 62, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, I left the marriage and was both very frightened about, dating, like, is anybody going to want me? Who's out there? And are they going to want who I really am, or are they going to want some mask or projection? Because I had
Right.
had a lot of that when I was younger. I was very pretty, and people wanted me because they thought I was hot, and I'm many other things. So I like I'm not 20 anymore, but that was what I struggled with then, and so I had a lot of fear, but I also was so excited. I mean, like I say, the 16-year-old in me was very dominant. Like, I'm going to go make out. I'm going to go have sex. I'm going to
Yeah.
connect with people.
Yeah.
And then I think there were things that were exciting and were really fun. And I did find that I had never flirted. I had never um really romanced in the way that people do when they date, which
Yeah.
I'm ambivalent about. Like, I liked it, but it also builds chemistry that may not lead to anything real.
Uh-huh.
But I think in terms of what you're talking about, I both felt like, oh, wow, I didn't do such a bad job picking who I picked for
Hmm.
35 years,
Hmm.
especially in my 20s, right?
Uh-huh.
There are many good things about the marriage that I wasn't able to find with the people that I dated.
Mm.
And I also noticed that I had baggage. Like, I don't want to do this like I did in my marriage. I don't want to
Hmm.
pick someone like this like my ex. So I
Yeah.
had, and that I'm still unraveling, and maybe will be. I mean, 35 years, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
really long time. It
Yeah.
has an impact on you, and you don't get to realize the impact till you're out of it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. When you say that, it makes me think about how I was just talking with one of my daughters yesterday about y- you know, I always feel like we're always making our best choice, right? Whenever we don't ever wake up. My my mentor has said this. We never wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'll make my second best choice today." We just don't do that, right? We're always with whatever our toolbox is at that moment. We're making the best choice that we can, and sometimes we start a thing or we do a thing and then it feels like, oh, well, why did I do that? And we never know until we look back, sometimes decades later, and go, oh, I see how that all fits in the picture now. I learned something there that helped me later. I kind of love that about life. I also love that about, now being in my 60s and, thinking about looking back at the journey on occasion, saying, oh, yeah, it's working out.
Yeah, I mean, I got something from everyone I dated.
Mhm.
And the person in the book who I think you would arguably say is the most difficult person that I dated was very good at stalking people on the internet.
Uh-huh.
And I had mentioned a childhood friend that I had never been able to find, who was like, she saved my life, and she went and found her.
Wow.
And after we broke up, she put us in touch, and I hadn't seen this person for 40 or 50 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And we reconnected. We talked about things we had never talked about when we were kids, and like that's the gift of a lifetime
Yeah.
from someone who in many other ways I would say, yeah, I could have given that one a miss.
Uh-huh.
But look what I would have lost,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Skylar, I just want to thank you so much for this time and joining me. And I'm excited for you and your book, Bachelorx, a non-binary memoir. So again, this is Skylar Lyralen Kaye, and author of Bachelorx. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me on Audiobook Connection. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow book lover or author. Until next time, keep listening, keep creating, and keep connecting.